you. You say hello, you say hello back.
Hello. Is it love or what?
How's everybody feeling?
Good.
Good. I'm excited to talk about art.
Yeah.
My name is Kemi Adeyemi. Many of you in this room know me as your professor or your accomplice in thinking. I'm very excited to introduce Shawné Michaelain Holloway today, who is the final guest of the Black Embodiments Studio of 2018-2019 year. I direct the Black Embodiments Studio here on campus in collaboration with Emily Zimmerman, who is the director of the Jacob Lawrence Gallery, where we are here right now. And I wouldn't be able to do this work without the support of Matt Howard. Raise your hand. My fearless email collaborator who runs my life a little bit. Thank you. The Black Embodiments Studio is funded by the Simpson Center for the Humanities, which is an institute here on campus that supports faculty work. It's right here. 2 quick notes. The Black Embodiments Studio website, which is blackembodiments.org, has a calendar of all of the Black art that is in Seattle. It's an ongoing updated calendar in one place, so if you are ever looking for Black art, there's one place that you can go. Matt updates it, so thank you again for that. Another note, there's a reception after this talk, so please stick around. There are some seats here. There might be some, are there chairs in the back behind you? Shawné Michaelain Holloway is an artist whose rich, multidisciplinary, multi-platform work exemplifies the goals and the aims of the Black Embodiments Studio, which is to examine how ways of seeing, being, and feeling Blackness are staged in contemporary art. There are 2 main functions of the Black Embodiments Studio. One, it serves as a public lecture series dedicated to bringing Black curators and Black artists like Shawné here to Seattle. BES also serves as an arts writing incubator for graduate students and postgraduates who want to immerse themselves in genres of arts writing, from the short form review to the exhibition catalog essay, and who are invested in arts writing as a critical venue through which theories of Blackness can be explored. And as I'm sure we'll see tonight, Shawné's practice, which includes works in sound, video, performance, and installation, has always been circumscribed by a rigorous writing practice, a writing practice that blurs the boundaries between poetry and theory, that understands poetry and theory are one and the same. I look forward to tonight's talk as a demonstration not only of the technical and conceptual interests that animate Shawné's work, but of how the labor of thinking with and through writing is an invaluable method of making as well. So I want to have everybody clap to welcome Shawné.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
I'm really excited to be here. First and foremost, I'm going to make sure that this guy never pops out again, the iTunes thing. Thank you so much, Kemi, for that really wonderful intro, because that was really beautiful, and I really enjoy being sort of contextualized as a poet. That's how I started, and it is very important for me that my viewers know that. Also, you foreshadowed all the time, so that will be to come. I want to let you know where y'all, or where I'm at, where I'm meeting y'all at. I'm at sort of a end of a 7-year exploration. They say you go in with questions and you should never come out with the same questions. What is new media? Is a huge question for me, both at sort of the start of that in 2012, but also now in 2019. The sort of nuances of that question have changed. New media is like 1,000 different things. Does anyone have a definition of new media, or what they think new media might be, or what they see new media identified artists doing?
I know you do. You're all in a new media art class.
I am also a professor, and I will sit here and be like, go on y'all talk. What is new media? Take a guess. What's new media for you?
New forms of communication.
Awesome. What else is new media?
Digital artwork.
Digital artwork, yes. What else is new media?
Well, some of my students.
Yeah.
Audiovisual artwork.
Audiovisual, and I like that answer because you also you didn't repeat the digital in that. There's lots of different kinds of audio, there's lots of different kinds of visual things and different ways of making these things. And going into my art making practice, I was coming from knowing a lot about history. I knew a lot about how light was created. I knew a lot about early sort of cave drawings and how writing came to be and how writing utensils came to be. To be able to attach a type of historical throughway to the sort of work that I was to be making, and this is back in 2012 when I became an artist, was super important for me, and that's why I started to be a new media identified artist. Recently, if you Google me, you'll see that I will also have a performance artist sort of tacked on there. In the middle, I had a internet artist label tacked on to me. And so these things sort of like ebb and flow and change. Sometimes you'll see like Shawné Michaelain Holloway, painter. I'm like, all right. And I started to saying it's very important for people to know that I'm a poet. So Shawné Michaelain Holloway, poet. The way that I define new media, and I think it's everyone who uses new media, which is all of us, so I think it's up to us to define it for ourselves in the way that we find it important, is a dominant mode of, or a dominant medium used to be able to mediate and communicate to a large group of people or a majority. This can also be the perfect medium or a tailored medium to communicate with folks that you are directly trying to target or communicate to, right? So we're going back to that sort of like McLuhan thing where he's like, the medium is the message. I know he's probably really bored of hearing that. Anyone heard that before? Yes, I see some no's. This is exciting. Okay, cool. Well, Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. I really started understanding the medium is the message when the whole sort of internet art thing came about. I wasn't feeling connected to what I was seeing. I saw a lot of replicated logos. I saw a lot of shiny white interfaces. I saw a lot of white faces. I saw a lot of white makers. I saw a lot of technology that I didn't really understand. As being a maker and wanting to be able to root my work in history and root my work in a language that I understood and make sure that other people also understood, I had to cultivate a new definition of what new media was and what it could have been for me. I can count literally 3 Black artists in my curriculum as like a young person studying new media. That was, well, 4. Mindy and Keith Obedike, who are like so fantastic. They have a project called Blackness, in which they sold their blackness on eBay in the early 2000s. Tale of Tales, who created a video game called Endless Forest. That is a video game in which you are a sort of heavenly stag that you play. It's an MMORPG where you play with other people, and it only runs on your screensaver. And Young Jake. Does anyone remember Young Jake? No? Okay, well. Right, so new media also has its time and its place to communicate what we need to be communicated right then and there. Oh, also Hennessy Youngman. Okay, so that's fine. That's pretty good. That's good. And I felt that I was really sort of the next generation of this legacy of Black new media artists, Black internet artists, and I wanted to say, cool, sometimes this work still doesn't reach me, so how can I take what I knew about these Black artists' work, who always had a kind of, like, there was always something sort of uncomfortably personal about these artists' work. There was also what technology that you owned, you could run it. Tale of Tales' screensaver game was probably like the most complicated thing, and you really just had to figure out how to put your screensaver on. This was sort of it. And also, there was a kind of like direction that they always wanted you to go. They used the technology in order to push their work forward in an inviting way, instead of like a way that sort of bombarded you or told you, or sort of mimicked this kind of like mass marketing, commercialized sort of repeat logo. This was like the fake Nike, the era of the fake Nike symbols. And I thought that was just such a, I mean, you know, there's so much sort of coming at us on the internet at the time. Their work was a way for me to understand how to slow down within that and make my own decisions on how fast I wanted to actually consume the work. And I took that model and I ran with it, basically. Fast forward now, I want to show you this particular work called the Chamber Series. It is a 20-piece set, basically. It's an experimental publishing project in the same way as these artists and these projects that I just introduced to you, of which actually there's a lot of, like, there's not very much documentation, by the way. A lot of this work kind of gets lost. This work is a trail, basically, and you can follow it. You don't have to follow it. It's made out of a lot of zip files. It's made out of a lot of puzzles. And so in that same way that they sort of invited you to participate with them, with the work, along with the work, I'm also inviting you to the Chamber Series. So I'm just going to read this description. The Chamber Series, which I've been working on since 2017, is a portfolio of scores inspired by graphic notation for classical music that illustrates a series of BDSM acts. Using an invented symbol-based language, these scores are set up to be read and played out as a performance called a scene, or an intimate moment for a single actor exploring the popular kinks. This scene is one in celebration of puppy play. And I didn't define puppy play here, but I will define
Messages.
it. Puppy play is a type of BDSM play where people might like to dress up as puppies for a number of different reasons. Sometimes it's sexual, sometimes it's not, but really what it is a setup and a role play for you to understand the dynamics between a non-human play and a human play, or a non-human sort of like loving relationship with another human, which can take all sorts of forms. That means a lot of like non-verbal communication. It means a lot of barking, and it means a lot of like real fantasy work on the part of the person who's playing the puppy. And this is like a widely practiced thing in the subculture. Mostly queer people, actually most like queer cis white guys, even though that's changing. There's like lots of different aesthetic signifiers for puppy play. Here you can kind of see, I'm putting this in this image, I've got ears. This is a tail that's also very, very standard, and most people have a kind of like uniform that they wear. So that's puppy play. Built in 10 parts, each score is accompanied by a partner publication called The Companion that deepens the viewing of the Chamber Series scores. This publication is a zip file-based reader that incorporates multimedia files viewers must play, read, or solve. For example, the first issue of The Companion contained an edition of puzzles, a crossword, a word search, and a printable version of a fragmented image. That's what the file looked like down here. That single sentence would then be translated into a framework for a film appearing in the next part of the reader. The scores and the reader are separate works, related only by that which is interior, thoughts and feelings, and that which is exterior, commands and actions to the main character. Eventually, this intricate web of work builds itself into a two-channel Afrofuturist narrative centered around a human puppy who realizes that she's actually a wolf and the mechanical play pet for a very cool unknown master. I draw my inspiration from the intersections of Donna Haraway's work on the Companion Species Manifesto, which I'll read you an excerpt of Julie Eastman's scores written in graphic notation, and Grant Morrison's graphic novel, We Three, which is also like totally ripped off by that new movie. Have you seen it? It's like the Robo Dog. Yeah, some of you, yeah, basically that you've read the comic book. In the series, basically, the animal is kind of just hunted after and assumed dangerous because of the way that it looks and the way that it navigates. And ends up getting really, really hurt by a number of people, and the love bonds are tested, which is a very similar kind of dynamic if you're playing in one of these puppy play scenes. One of these puppy play scenes might be a kind of like search and destroy, or it might be a, show me sort of like how much we can relate. So I've been doing performances, which are performances of the scores that I mentioned, and they look like this. The reason for this graphic notation is that to be able to remember a scene, or to be able to carry a scene, or to be able to understand an isolated incident of this like role play moment, we have to be able to record it within something other than our bodies. And the reason why that it was inspired by Julius Eastman was there's some recording of Julius like sort of ranting about like how he's never going to ever put classical music notation in the hands of a vocalist, because that's just like not how that type of like emoting, or like that type of motion, or I'm not finding the right word, but that type of person should be able to have to read what they're supposed to, it doesn't match up, and there's no other way to record these scenes that are generally happening in spaces where there's no recording allowed, there's no photography, stuff like this, for people's privacy, but also just for posterity reasons. So I had to be able to come up with a way to remember this. Also, it's a way to plan, because some of these scenes regarding safety are a little tricky, and to be able to plan, execute, and then remember is an incredibly sort of fulfilling experience, not only for a person who's practicing in BDSM, but also for a person who is trying to sort of relate these actions to someone else, to find the nuances of some maybe a reason, or the sort of like emotional transformations we go through when we're in captivity, or we're having conversations about captivity. But more importantly, how this reflects technology is that it's a type of programming. And this is also a really good example of what I meant by, this is my definition of new media. I'm using a new technology, which is this, right? And you can't forget that reading and writing is a type of important technology, to be able to communicate or transmit information to a very targeted audience, or to a majority population, right? And so I've done this many times out, and within these performances and these scores, there's a training aspect. So playtime composition 1, basic functions, documents a demonstrated understanding of a new training role. Having been given a rope to tug the signal she needs to go outside, and a few pillows where she can go rest, the performance is centered on how the player discovers the orientation of her body in relationship to objects of communication. With her hands bound in vet wrap, which is like some like sticky thing that sticks to itself and is super sticky, makes pause. In a new collar, she falls deeper into subspace than in the previous document. So here is also a picture. Oh, you can't see that, can you? Oh, okay, well, we'll figure it out. There's a picture there of me in one of the performances. Can you see that one? Is that better? So, kind of. Oh, okay, well. I'm actually doing these things. So sort of cycling back, training is the most sort of like close parallel that I could find to programming. And I think it's really important right now to entertain, well, this is one of my questions sort of coming out of this 7-year period, is how can we integrate the new media ways and, you know, sorcery with the body? Like, what can that mean? And I want to go further than what does it mean to like include dance and video together, which is fine, I'm all here for that, but how can we really make one-on-one comparisons to the ways that our bodies function and the ways in which we can feel and use technology? Because technology is something that we're always kind of handling, right? We're sleeping with it. This is nothing new. It like sees us naked, or sees me naked. And we're very intimate with it. And so, at what point do we start incorporating these technological things into our bodies? Because the language of technology is already sort of like pulled out from other parts of our lives, right? So like they had to call a window so that you understood that you were looking at a thing you could open and close. What else? There's like a master-slave thing somewhere in the computer, and also encoding. That's life talk, So what does it mean to take that one step ahead, cycle back, and really incorporate it into us? And also, what does that do to this language of the cyborg, right? If the cyborg is something that's half machine, half person, how explicit does that have to be? And I think that's also something that I'm trying to kind of work out in the Chamber series, because we're so sort of, if we're motivated by something technological, if we can't live without it, I think that we're there already. The last portion of the Chamber series that I did was, this is a still from it, Is It Love? It's a training plan and code notes in the form of an architectural plan. So I took it one step further and said, how can I build an architecture of this new language and this new notation that I've built, and insert it sort of back into this world of structure and planning and predictability and memory, right? And like, actually, how do I literally rebuild these things? This is, can you see that? Okay. This is going to be the real life installation of this. I was in an exhibition called Refiguring the Future. And what I did was I made it 36 by 24, which is like this big. The pages were this big. And you had to kneel down, of which I totally instructed you to do that as well, on this concrete floor to be able to read this piece. And for me, that was a way of being able to reflect the context of the content of the book in the actual ways in which you read it and approached the work. I don't want anything usually that I make to be looked at unless it's like somehow painful and like you want it really bad and like you can't touch it, sort of a thing. Like I need there to be some sort of interaction happening. And this one in particular, this book was about how to get people to behave in the ways that you want them to, right? How can you program your audience? The sort of quote on here is, what is the feeling that rises within us when we feel compelled to answer a summons? So thinking about what that means, in an intimate context, this book was about like an intimate encounter, but what does that also mean, like when your phone rings, when you get a text message? What does that mean when you get a text message from someone you like, #really like, or like someone, that you're talking to versus like, I don't know, you're like mean uncle or something. Yeah, like what does that mean? And to then sort of answer those questions with this like almost dedication of sort of, ruining your knees, and also like laborious page turning. what does that mean to the relationship that you have to that summons that is answered? And also, what is that relationship that you can have to me as a voice guiding you there? There's a lot of trust that comes into that, and there's like a lot of consent work that goes into that too. And those are conversations that I'm actively having all the time with my work. And I know, like, this, well, I'm not going to show that. Okay. If you Google me, these things will come up. So sort of in this wake of trying to beget a kind of participation that I want, right? The title of the talk is Focus on the Behavior That You Want, which is a line in one of the Chamber Series performances, of which I make these like really laborious, long 40-minute videos that I perform to. I really am going back to this form of the EXE, or, well, actually I'm going to ask, does anyone know what a .exe is? Yes? Yes. Shout it out. It is a program, and it runs. It's called an executable program, which I feel like maybe college folk are all now using Macs, but this is sort of a Windows thing. Thank you. But I'm really returning back to this form of the .exe. That last piece of the book was an exe in saying that this file is executable. You will execute these motions, and this file is infinitely executable, right? And so that particular book was also like an online, you can interact with it online, and you can also view it as a performance. So this executable file took many, many forms, and you can re-execute it and re-execute it and re-execute it. And I'm also finding that letters work in the same way. And so I've spent the last 6 months, like at least in 1 or 2 cities every month, writing letters. And with letters, you know, there is a type of programmatic interactions that you have with them. You're sent a letter, you open the letter, you read the letter, you absorb the letter, you put it down. These types of letters, for me, are also ways to get out of the kind of sort of shocking body practice that I have, whether that is like being down on the concrete on my knees as a puppy, or playing noise music in which like my approachability is like very far. You know, I do sort of I make a lot of effort to make sure that I'm simultaneously as far away and unapproachable to you as possible, but also that I can connect with you sort of at a close sort of like intellectual level. Reading these letters out loud has been a way for me to sort of close that gap a little bit, and also reflect and build those questions for the year sort of moving forward. And I wanted to bring some notes that I have had sort of in and out of these letters, meditations on technology, meditations on some of the things that I've talked about as being present in the last work, but also to give you an overview a little bit about how my videos, which is like sort of another thing that I'm very known for, is making videos and then sort of making rigs and things inside of galleries that are able to play these videos, how those interact with my thought. And also I saw a lecture with C. Riley Snorin, and like they gave me, which is sort of like, I love this form of the note. So this is all C. Riley Snorin, and I totally thank them for that. Also, I'm time checking.
You have 30 minutes.
Great. Okay. If I go over, just L and K. Okay. It's about 30. All right. So I'm going to start this this note, this set of notes. Also, I should mention that I'm leaving this up here all accessible. It will be accessible online, but also for accessibility reasons. I'm going to go kind of fast. So all of these links and things will be up if you're interested. Touch and change. The exe file is called an executable. We use them to install software programs on hardware devices, leaving the machine profoundly changed. In most situations, we then see the device as more capable, more valuable. We may even touch it differently or work harder to keep it safe. The user then possesses a new object, but doesn't mean its value has fundamentally changed. What about its value in relation to us? What about all objects we encounter and therefore, after that, looking, acting, and feeling similarly, but are not in fact the ones we've handled or come to understand?
I'm only going to bed. Night. I'm only going to bed. Night.
The remarkable power of owning the transformation, and most notably the expansion of a body, is seen across life in education, child rearing, arts, crafts, and design, but also shows up as slavery, at all times wielding itself as a tool for securing legacies of generally individualized networks through progeny, protected by a propensity for continuing on the pathways towards a maximized version of functional sameness. The capability for infinite reproduction of these images, read disk image, read self-image, allows for private dominions in which one rules and rules and rules over fields of delicately arranged, gated communities of human functionality. Operate, read, touch them right, and change your life. Have your mind read, feel seamlessness, handle ease. But can we understand precedents? How much of an illusion is it to believe we can really set them up via our own knowledge of the historical? What desires and familiarities are exchanged for inherited and have transferred themselves into our desires? Assume everything overlaps. Is that self-soothing? 3. Can we remember? I'm thinking of a farmer. If we define technology as a useful apparatus to aid in the empowerment of the human, anything we make and use qualifies as a useful media. As sentient beings with a desire for a healthy future, we want to continue to improve. Those of us who were brought up in the Western culture under capitalism and Catholicism and all other of these non-rhythmic powers that we are obsessed with productivity. The urge and fight for a space of our own, begotten by our own hands, reigns supreme on our culture-wide list of priorities. By sequestering play away from domesticity into the realm of desire, we are unable to imagine for ourselves an active and fluid transition between the usefulness and the present. Full lives of tools. Read anything we see as having a possible use. Note, even if that use is not benefiting us. Our greed and conflicting asceticism prepares a perfect cocktail for leering and assumption building. Our eyes believe what we see on the surface, read in the light, read on the screen, and accepting that as the way that it has to, must always continue in its path of becoming. Away from the light, we remember the sensation of its glow, the blue, the red, the green, the blue, the warmth, the blue, the vision, the sensation, only to define ourselves as in need of that thing in its own form, in its constant light emission, to define ourselves as not it, that dazzling thing that warms and forms our refusal of it in pursuit of more practical matters in which to place our actual beliefs and meditation patterns. From this view, we can remember what worked for us, very much away from that distracting, sparkling thing, and spend our time strung along in our perspective on the movements and the visions of a much lesser, shining thing that we perhaps once just as glittering, was just as glittering for those that came before. They remember how to do it, if there are generations now that have forgotten. The motion of placing a stick in the sand helped us discover our power, create shadows. Creating shadows taught our hands to understand time. Understanding time, perhaps, led to an organization structure. Then organizing a structure helped us create the mere necessity for stronger ones. Stronger structures mean less labor. Less labor means more worship, but more worship somehow leads back to more labor. More labor came with more dazzling things, and the cycle continues and continues and weaves itself beyond, between a hope, a glance, a real looking, a denial, a refusal, and cycles back again. When we cycle, we forget the knowing of the warmth of the glittering thing and let the fear of impracticality threaten our request for increasing the value of that thing so we can feel carry us both into a twofold truth. Dear those who are present enough to receive, even when they cannot listen, how I explained to my mom I was a puppy. I'm here to tell you that I type really well. At 80 words per minute, I can edit papers, send breakup emails to your girlfriends, get well past your moms, and pen a few new poems all within the hour. In second grade, I had a typing teacher. Do you remember typing class? We had those that would come around and tap hard at the back of our hands, and I say tap, but I mean like just smack. if we were not off the keyboard, if our wrists were not the keyboard. She told us if we did not hover them at the correct distance while keeping our backs straight, we would get a carpal tunnel and never be able to live a normal life again. Whatever that meant, I was resentful. As a kid, I had been diagnosed with an illness that had disabled me at 8, so I knew how that felt for real. I'd come home with D's and F's from that class, but that lady never touched me. Turns out I always had the best score in the class by 10 words, but failed because of procedural non-compliance. I couldn't understand why my wrists were standing in the way of me. Each time I would slouch a bit and sit cross-legged in a big computer chair, which I might add was absolutely a posture against a successful document typing protocol. I feel energized by the squishy hand rests and how it felt to dig my palms into the artificial fabric that lined the keyboard, at which I thought I was making such magic. I was convinced that the softness of the jelly was what was helping me fling my fingers with such precision and accuracy from one tall plastic key to another, bouncing back and forth and back and forth. As a teen, I played World of Warcraft until there were way too many expansions and Counter-Strike started making me some cash. With that money, I bought 2 things. The first was a baseball team-sized bucket of Big League Chew, and the second was a matching padded keyboard and mouse set just like the ones we used so many years back. It was big and red and squishy and smelled vaguely of petroleum jelly. As I ran through Phoenix Compound and Dust Town and Dust 2, anybody remember those? Okay, I get one person, okay. I giggled, reminded of the magic I thought I had been making in typing class, and I giggled at myself for thinking that the sorcery was limited to a simple word processor software. To think I thought that connection, my fingers coordinating with movements of text on the screen was like the coolest thing in the world is now just very cute to me because that's the most delicate and important type of sorcery now. And it was maybe on to something. Through Counter-Strike and World of Warcraft, I learned a different kind of magic that made me feel everything, or made everything feel a little less alone. We connected in live gameplay through time and space, through audio-only headsets giving us a sense of co-presence. We formed teams that supported each other, we won things, we lost things, and we found a new type of chosen family. Many of these players were faceless, and after I stopped playing the games, I lost track of who they were and also who I was there. From time to time, I wonder if Jake, a boy from Texas, ever graduated, or if Josh, who was a sad god who really didn't like life all that much, could have really done all the things he told me he would do that one night after we lost in a really bad dungeon fight. This was all pre-social media as we know it, and I didn't have the language to understand what it was I was trying to absorb or create through all these hours and hours and hours of active time sharing a screen. It's only now, through all these studies I've been on since the time the world didn't end that one year in 2012. Do you remember that? Yeah, I had a really cute Into the World noise touring band, like totally noise voice group called Interview. Anyways, yeah, I just need to understand a bit more. Right now, it's really hot. to think about intimacy in technology. At first glance, I think we can safely say that intimacy is a part of what attracts people like me to the screen in the first place. For example, in typing class, I was able to get undivided attention from the machine. I found control there. It did what I wanted it to do, and I, in return, ran it as it asked. I could finally focus, and what, if not a type of hyper-focus, is intimacy. Later, I found intimacy in my networks of MMORPGs, but I could still go out and find intimacy on the same level in the real world, so why did I keep searching in the screen?
Self-confidence, energy, and other drug-specific feelings. For meth, like you are king, or for MDMA, like you love everyone. However, you owe these drugs back what they delivered to you. After a meth binge or lots of MDMA use or staying up all night on coke, you will feel like shit.
What typically happens with a lot of people is they get conditioned either through school, church, society. On some level, they're conditioned to stay. What made you different? Why did you continue to work when others lose this ability or push it away? So that's the vibe.
For me, there's something satisfying about the basic nature of technology that is foundationally transactional. I am, you get, you are, you get, this is how I live with machines. I wish the I am, I get, you are, you get to everyone. In this dynamic, we retain agency. We are our own productivity, bodies, intellects, decisions, aesthetics, and we retain that through the distances that we keep. This is why I am always surprised we don't talk about longing more than we talk about intimacy. Life with and in computers means having a life in proximity. It also means living a life of loss and of failure and of obsolescence. However, most importantly, living life with machines means living a life of possibility. Within this possibility, our bodies are implicated and so are our hearts. To live with possibility means we must circle back to proximity. We are always already in proximity to potential, to one another, and to things we'll never understand. Whether that's through being taught how to use a computer, touching a machine another human once made, logging onto the internet, or making a phone call, there is always an other staring back. Any network device is a fluid access point for these connections, accelerating them and providing us with new units of measurement to understand how to facilitate better communication, more productivity, and better relationships. They are the companions we have around us. I look to ontology for pointing out all the icky behaviors we as humans are capable of enacting on our companions. Because we are in proximity, we need to understand boundaries and where to have them with humans and non-humans alike. We are always with each other, with machines, and we can always change the world in this togetherness. Play with me. Count the number of times you've sent a message today. Count the number of times you've wanted to reach out. Count the number of times you've wanted to reach out just to receive the message in return. What did you use to reach out? Count the number of times you've searched for something in the internet today. Is it different than the number of times you've reached out? If so, recount the number of times you've reached out. Can you count the number of servers pinged to retrieve those search results? Is it different than the number of times you've wanted to reach out just to receive the message in return? If so, recount the number of times you've reached out just to receive the message in return. What countries did your request run through just for you to get your message, your results? What did you touch to reach out? Lastly, Donna Haraway wrote something called the Companion Species Manifesto, which I mentioned before. In it, she studies dogs in order to study our attachments to other things, capital T things. She has this to say about the ontological choreography of humans in relationship to things we seek attention from. Commonly in the US, dogs are attributed for the capacity for unconditional love. According to this belief, people burdened with misrecognition, contradiction, and complexity in their relationships to other humans find solace in unconditional love from their dogs. In turn, people love their dogs as children. In my opinion, both of these beliefs are not only based in mistakes, if not lies, but also they are in themselves abusive to dogs and to humans. A cursory glance shows that dogs and humans have always had a vast range of relating. But even among the pet-keeping folk of contemporary consumer cultures, or maybe especially amongst these people, belief in unconditional love is pernicious. If the idea that man makes himself by realizing his intentions in his tools, such as a domestic animal, dog, or computers, like a cyborg, is evidence of a neuroses I call humanist technophilic narcissism, then the superficially opposed idea that dogs restore human beings' souls by their unconditional love might be the neuroses of a canophilic narcissism. Because I find the love of and between historically situated dogs and humans precious, dissenting from the course of all conditional love matters. This is to say, there is really something in the connection, the internet's connection, the connection that we all have to our interface, and all the demands that we make there.
Can you talk a little bit about your music and the sound choices that you have for the different videos?
Yeah, so all of my sound that I've done, this is the browser. I call them browser compositions. And what that means is, actually, I can show you. Okay. I compose all of that music from sounds that I've created in the browser. So like any sound that the internet makes. And sometimes that's like a little push in one way or another. For example, like this is probably my most used, we'll get it. This particular internet synthesizer is like one of my most used tools for creation. There we go. And I have a program called Sound Hijack. That doesn't want to pop up, that records like all the internal processes in your computer. You can also record just like, this is, for example, like I said, it's a record browser only. And this was really important for me sort of like to be able to create all of the elements of any video with the place that it was going to be in, right? So that it would sort of be like, I sort of like natural object in that kind of habitat. I get like included in a lot of sustainability exhibitions, which like completely blows my mind because I'm using these things that like create so much waste. But still, I think it makes so much sense sometimes in the ways that I produce things. But also to like give sort of a vocal track to the internet and sort of pay homage to the place that I took. I mean, most of that footage is not mine. But I'm like really into sort of noisy metal and these sorts of things. So aesthetically, that's just why. Because I think it's cool. You had a question?
Yeah, I was curious. It's, I'm sure, difficult to sum up, but was there something that, inspired you to kind of, choose this genre? And, was there something that was, I'm sure it's not a single event, but at what point did you feel like you felt the connect?
Yeah, it was just sort of like a place that I'd always been at, the internet, at the locale. I'd always been at the internet, and I like stumbled into a class in college where there were like really cool people, and they were doing that thing that sort of was my question sort of in the first half of the talk of me saying like I needed to find a way to connect the history that I knew to the medium that I was created, so I didn't feel like I was like creating in a bubble kind of a thing. And because bubbles like aren't fun for me, and I like wanted to have friends because I was homeschooled. But also like it was the place that I was spending all of my time, and there's sort of a long backstory to that, but it became easy for me because the media, as we defined also at the beginning, like can be anything. So I create performance, I'm like creating like 3 sculptures and an installation, and so it allows me to do all of the things that I need to do with a sort of supportive background and a way to also talk about theory moving forward and how we can create our world. Yeah.
This is kind of weird, but do you find yourself like with like a lot of like the sexual pieces, like finding spaces that are already safe for like that type of expression of sexuality, or do you find yourself also like educating and creating new spaces for other people to create like that kind of safe space for sexuality?
Yeah, so how do I answer that? Lots of questions. First of all, I'm a sexuality educator, and so I work like doing that, and I have for like the last 10 years, like at sex shops. And it feels like very weirdly clinical and for me in that way. So I've been in doing my sex education. I've been in sort of places that would not be deemed a safe space, and also like right now I'm working in this super feminist, like awesome, everybody gets toys sort of place, and that's been a really interesting place to be too, because there's like almost less conversation about like how to create that safe space, and so I feel like a lot of my work goes into places where sexuality is not present, so that we can kind of like talk about those things, whether or not they're a safe space actually at all. And most of that footage, like the blue one is meant to just sort of like hover about. There's 4 in that series, and it's sort of replicating like when you go to these porn clubs, it's just like hanging out there, and you're supposed to watch it and feel shy because of it, which so it was weird to screen it in this way. But that will go in like sort of regular gallery, and there's like sort of like violence that happens because of that. But all of that original footage was paid for by people on the internet. So like it originated in a place that wasn't safe. I put it in places that aren't particularly safe, but all of the lack of safety is like a weird formulaic thing that this is almost even supposed to bring out in a certain way. So I kind of like shoulder that responsibility because I know, I mean, you can never really like expect what a trigger can do to your body or to your mind, but like I know the kinds of things to predict in sort of like presenting this kind of content. Yeah. I saw a hand over here somewhere. Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could say anything about how you sort of use it, like how you like maintain agency in that fugitive and stuff.
I don't. I have like my recommended is like Tink probably will pop up. Well, no, it's wigs and salons. So it knows what I like. It knows what I am in all ways, shapes, and forms. See. And future, yeah, it's just a catalog of everything that I talk about, even sort of on a daily basis. So I don't take protocol, like very many protocols to keep safe on the internet. It's bad, but it's not. I see another hand go up over here somewhere. No? Wait, hold on, you already asked one.
Oh,
yeah.
I was curious, like, is there like or what you want from the audiences after they interact with your art pieces?
Just ask questions like you guys are doing now, or one time, so last talk I gave, there was this small like exercise that happened. Let's see if I can find it. And this was like a place where like nobody likes to talk to each other. It's like a very sort of like cold environment. And so I was like, okay, we'll figure that out. And so we did this. And I immediately sat down and was like, what was your experience? Let's find it. Okay, yeah, here it is. wrote, I said something like, turn to your neighbor. Something like, turn to your neighbor, I'll just let it, yeah, use your free hands, turn to your neighbor, use your free hand to quickly tap your neighbor, also your neighbor's hand when instructed. And then it goes into this like Morse code tapping situation. And the pattern of the word touch. I built in some time for people to not be shy, apparently. Cool. Which somehow it wasn't, and still that performance like kind of failed because it wasn't enough time because people didn't know. But yeah, so I had people touch each other that didn't know each other, and that created this like environment of just like super awkwardness. And you know, I was like, what is your experience? And generally, I don't need that question asked unless you want to maybe like interact with the work online or something like this. But I hope that in your mind, because there's a lot of questions that I ask in all of these works, and also a lot of my work is just being like, I don't know, what do you think? You know, you know, I hope that like these things are actually sort of going in your mind, whether or not you relate to what's on the screen or the way that I present or not.
Thank you so much for that great talk.